Hello, and welcome back to another Elden Ring. Last time, we killed a couple of politicians and refused to face the consequences. Today, we will be doing the same thing but on a much grander scale. We'll also be making a woman hate us by denying her the right to end her own life, reversing the worst ending we've locked ourselves into, and killing a literal god. Ranni's questline sends us off as the first part of our journey. You do remember Ranni, right? The one who I didn't mention and gifted us our first spirit summon and then never appeared again. Well, she is now residing in her tower, which is located behind the Caria Manor. A castle full of enemies that gave me more than a handful. And don't even get me started on Royal Knight Loretta, a boss so fine they reuse her later in the game. After we arrive at Ranni's tower and pledge our alliance to her, we meet her allies, e.g. a man I love with all my heart even if it makes me gay, and Celibus, who I loathe with every fiber of my being.
I ask that you kindly try not to drag us all down with you.
Ranni wants us to fetch her treasure hidden in Nokron, located in the crater caused by the falling star after Radon's defeat. To get there, we will literally have to beat ourselves to death, but really, what are you, or me, going to do when you're literally stripped naked against yourself but the other self has a full set of gear? Huh? Once we have the treasure, we head back to Ranni and receive the inverted statue, which is about as useful as a health insurance in America. To progress the quest further, we need to find a miniature Ranni. But instead of using the teleporter, which I only discovered by accident later, we'll be heading back into Nokron for a double boss fight. And god, I hated this so much. Why do I have to fight two bosses at once while one of them drops my frame rate by 20 FPS because of an unoptimized poison effect? After finishing the boss fight, we are carried out by our personal escort into the deeper depths, a place that gives me severe PTSD and makes me cry at the sight of ants. Upon venturing deeper, we find yet another coffin that takes us to Aintel River, where we can find and annoy a miniature Ranni until it talks to us.
Oh, a dog.
We are tasked with going deeper into the underground and getting rid of a shade. Once that is finally dealt with, we emerge at the Lake of Rot, yet another swamp area that Miyazaki blessed us with. It applies Scarlet Rot, which slowly takes away at our health until we die. It's a really fun mechanic, by the way. And unless you've invested a few points in faith and obtained one of the most useful incantations in the game for this area, you're in for a rough time. Making your way through the lake, you might stumble upon this guy, and honestly don't even bother fighting him. It would have been a decent fight if it weren't for constantly being pushed off the ledge into the lake, only to jump back and get bitch slapped by him. And if you by some luck didn't die to that hit, Scarlet Rot will surely finish you off. After what felt like an eternity of slowly making our way deeper into the lake, we find yet another coffin that takes us to the most menacing boss door entrance yet. And what's behind it, you ask? A cosmic centipede with a gun license and a sniper rifle. How is this guy supposed to be harder than the double gargoyle boss fight? All he did was look weird and slam me against the wall, but to be honest, I kind of enjoyed it. It was a pretty cool boss fight. With a quick spritz of pesticide, he's finally 6 feet under, and now we can face yet another big obstacle. And of course, it's a big door we can't open. To unlock it, we must go back to Royal Akari Academy, open a chest, grab a ring, and finally use it to open the door. Behind it, there's an elevator that takes way too long to reach the top. Once we surface, we journey to a nearby cathedral and jump into a hole to find Ranni's corpse. We slip a ring on her finger, hopefully with consent, and finally complete her questline. And all of this was optional, mind you. After Ranni's questline is finished, we can actually progress into the next main zone. Now, we can choose one of two paths, either by going up the side of the mountain where the enemies sing the goddamn Halo soundtrack, and end it by killing one of the most overused enemies in the game, the Magma Worm. That quite literally makes your camera have an epileptic episode because it seemed to be having a spasm whenever I was fighting it. Like, what the fuck is going on? Or you can just get the two pieces of the medallion completely randomly while exploring and skip this whole section to never come back. Emerging on the other side, we find ourselves in the Altus Plateau, which lead us to the entrance of the main city, which of course is locked. This means we have to take a little detour, get shot at, and fight the Draconic Tree Sentinel, which possibly has one of the most retarded moves in the game. This lightning attack I could not for the love of god figure out how to dodge, because it basically tracks your position anytime you move, but I'm sure that's just a skill issue. Upon finally entering the capital, I have to say this is honestly one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen in a video game. Not only is there a giant dragon statue looming over the city that you can climb, the whole city just looks goddamn awesome. Melenia also basically says peace out and thanks us for taking her to the Earth Tree.
Farewell.
After exploring the capital for a bit, we finally find the first boss at the top of the city, Godfrey, first Elden Lord. And no, this is not the only time we will be fighting him, he's basically just a wannabe right now. And the actual fight against Godfrey, or Horalu, was one of the most fun ones in the game for me. I do not understand why they had to put the sun-bathed version of him up here. Next up, we face yet another gatekeeper who blocks our path to becoming the Elden Lord. This time it's a rematch against Margit, who's actually Morgoth. The fight is much faster paced compared to the first one. He reveals his walking stick is actually a sword. His health pool is really small however, so the boss fight isn't all that hard. Somehow, I managed to die even after killing him. Oh, look who's crawling back, it's Melenia, making fun of us this time for not being able to enter the Earth Tree. But fret not, she is here to help, offering us a hand in committing arson and burning down the entire Earth Tree. For this, we have to make our way to the next area. Let's hope there are no consequences. Our next stop is the mountain top of the giants, or as I like to call it, recycled garbage enemies thrown into the Minecraft Tundra biome. The closer we inch to the forge, our main objective for this part of the journey, the more we find out about Melenia and her masochistic tendencies, like how she wants to burn herself along with the Earth Tree. To be honest, I'm not sure I understand the game's lore, and I have a feeling Miyazaki doesn't either. Melenia was a pretty cool character though, so we're going to save her even if it's not fun at all and she doesn't want it. In order to do that, we have to venture into the capital once again. However, this time it won't be so pretty since we will be in deep shit, and that is quite literally. That is because we will be in the sewers. We get here by jumping down a well, and honestly past that point I have no clue where the fuck I was going. This was one of the most frightening experiences I have had in any game. That doesn't say much however, since I'm too scared to play any kind of horror games. My life is already scary enough. The reason for all this is mostly these goddamn tubes and the holes in them that make you fall down further into the system. The most fun part is, however, this thing, presumably a Discord moderator. Not only did I not know what he was doing, but the sounds he made were terrifying. The first time I fell down here, I felt like I was finding out about Slender Man all over again. When you actually manage to find your way out of all that and descend into the very depths of the capital, you are properly greeted by Mog. He is basically just a watered down version of another boss. He throws blood at you, explodes fireballs into your face, and seems to have a weird obsession with the air, because he just loves to attack you for some reason. I also do not understand why stakes of Marika are even in the game. They're basically checkpoints, usually in front of the boss arena, that you can respawn at later when you die to the boss. So why do I have to spend longer running to the actual boss than fighting him? After the fight is done, a secret passage can be revealed, a deep pit that you can make your way down into. With platforming mechanics so bad, I'd rather actually be scooping my brain out with a very tiny teaspoon. I have probably spent close to 20 minutes just trying to make my way down here. Once you actually do make it down, the floor breaks beneath you and you find yourself in yet another secret area. Resting at the side of Grace makes Melenia pop up and say something along the lines of
"Go or bad, flame bad, no go or me angry."
I do not listen to women though, since they are just background noise, and I promptly make my way there, only to be greeted by 3 fingers and lock myself into the worst possible ending in the game. Worry not however, because there's one way to get out of this ending, which is probably the most convoluted way of doing anything in an RPG, and requires us beating possibly the hardest boss in the game. First, we have to go meet an old man who tells us to get an unalloyed gold needle, because Millicent, presumably his adopted daughter, is dying. Give Millicent the needle, find a random item, give it to her, kill a boss in a random village, speak to her again, make your way back to the mountaintop of the giants, speak to her near a castle, find 1-2 pieces of a medallion, and make your way to one of the lifts. Emerge on the desecrated snowfield, run across it, find a teleporter, but you know, you have to solve a puzzle, but it wouldn't be an Elden Ring puzzle without making invisible enemies come out of nowhere, and have archers that shoot you across the entirety of the area in which the puzzle takes place. Once you light the towers, which is a really original idea by the way, you are taken back and the teleporter finally becomes accessible. And we're finally at the Helix tree, which is, you know, a really big tree. and you make your way down it, falling down every single crevice and rolling off every single ledge. You are face to face with Loretta, and honestly this is a pretty fun boss fight. She alters between magic and melee attacks, both of which hit pretty hard, and you mostly have enough time to hit her back after you dodge an attack. It's basically a reskin Tree Sentinel but done well for once. Once we defeat her, a path to the city of Elphael opens up and we can finally make our way to Melenia, the Blade of Miquella if you didn't know. She is found at the base of the Helix Tree, and while we are making our way there, we talk to Millicent, find yet another good and fun time swamp. Seriously, we move at the pace of a dead infant, and of course a tree spirit. Defeated, help Millicent come back to the area, find her dead, steal her belongings, and we get the needle back. And we have finally finished off this questline. The boss I have mentioned is of course Melenia. Most people agree this is one of the hardest boss fights in the game, and she surely lives up to her name. With a move that is practically undodgeable unless you aren't already far enough away, a dive bomb attack and lifesteal that taps away on you like the game I'm describing. This just makes the boss fight so stressful it's insane. At times she also decides to be basically unhittable for up to 20 seconds because she is the one having fun, it's not you. I've used spirit summons very little in the game, around 3 or 4 times against actual major bosses. Melenia, however, pushed me over the edge, with her undodgeable moves, a second phase which refills basically her entire health bar, and a passive healing on every attack. Melenia, Blade of Miquella, is truly a boss in the game of Elden Ring, and one of the most frustrating yet strangely fun experiences. After her defeat, we can see a blooming flower, interact with it, and offer the unalloyed gold needle to receive Miquella's needle, a key item we will be using later. Now, we can finally return to the mountain top of the giants. Being mostly an unremarkable area apart from the fire giant, the Minecraft Tundra still does look amazing. Crossing the huge gap in between mountains on a chain was super cool, and the build-up, if you could call it that, to Borealis, a dragon that basically engulfs you with a freezing storm, was amazing, even though the boss fight was very underwhelming. The main reason we came here is the forge, however, and the aforementioned fire giant is guarding the way there. The boss fight in itself is okay. The highlight of it were probably the cutscenes, which were truly eye-opening. I'm sorry. Apart from that, it's your usual big guy fight. You basically cannot see anything, and honestly wasn't that hard compared to the other bosses. Defeating the fire giant opens up our way to the forge, where we commit arson and watch the world burn along with ourselves. After burning the Earth Tree, we come back to our consciousness in the Crumbling Farum Azula, and I think this is the first time I ever got goosebumps from a game. The ambience is absolutely amazing, and it's a great last major zone in the game. You can find 3 major bosses in here, and we will basically go in order. The Godskin duo being the first one we encounter, and I absolutely understand why most people hate the boss fight. Both of them have a response to throw a ranged attack if you even think about looking at your healing flask. They revive because why would they not, until you deplete their collective health bar. Fortunately for me, the fight wasn't that big of a problem since the enemy is so widely used in the game. The next boss to cross off on the list is Malekith, and I'm pretty sure it's that furry. I have mixed feelings about the fight. The first phase feels okay. There's a mix between ranged attacks and melee combat. The second phase turns the dial up to 11 and makes you feel like you're on the receiving end of an anime fight. He flies around the arena, spins like a Beyblade, and defies the law of gravity. If you think you're safe behind these pillars, you are not. It's not a bad boss fight by any means. However, once again, the only thing souring my experience with the boss was the 30-second boss run that you had to do every time you died. There's still one more spot we can visit in the Crumbling City, so that we don't get the Frenzy Flame ending. Do you remember the needle we got from Melenia? It's finally time to use it. First, we have to make our way to an arena that most players actually missed. And honestly, this fight is an absolute spectacle. We basically travel back in time in order to fight the Dragon Lord Placidus. The fight feels very cinematic. He sweeps down from the sky at you, fires lasers across the arena. Also, I wanted to mention this move because it's absolutely goddamn sick. The boss is optional and you don't actually need to beat him to get the other endings. However, I think it'd be a huge mistake to let up on this opportunity. With the Dragon Lord defeated, we can use the Needle of Miquella, which basically reverses our fate and we are no longer locked into only one ending. Turning to the capital, we can see it buried under seas of ashes, and we begin making our way to the base of the Earth Tree once again. Before reaching it, however, an NPC that basically doesn't even finish his dialogue before he dies gets in our way. An incredibly difficult fight, up there with the Soldier of Godric. And then there's this guy, Godfrey, first Elden Lord. This guy is an absolute Chad. Unlike most people, he actually praises us for making it this far. This boss fight is, once again, super fun. You jump over his ground attacks, his melee attacks are pretty well telegraphed, and it's overall a pretty enjoyable fight. In the second phase, after getting him down to half HP, presumably, I'm pretty sure this is below half health yet he is still in his first phase, he goes batshit insane. Suplexes you into the air just to throw you down, rips you apart if you die, to show you who the alpha really is, and is just really hard to deal with the first couple of times. It's not too bad though, and it doesn't take away from the experience of the boss fight, finally making our way into the Erdtree and entering the literal embodiment of the light at the end of the tunnel, which makes you go blind because of how bright it is, which is the funniest shit ever. We finally get to our final boss. It's Radagon, who's actually Queen Marika. The fight feels like an actual final boss, and he slaps you around like you're his bitch, throws giant lightning bolts that explode with an extreme delay from the start of the animation. Just as you're about to hit him, says peace out, makes you miss your attack, and promptly teleports on top of you to deliver a combo attack. Which is honestly kind of stupid at times. It basically turns into a waiting game, but is definitely not as bad as Melenia's 20-second combos. However, all of this is basically thrown to shit because of the other part, the Elven Beast. It's basically a god and a law enforcer. Don't get me wrong, the fight looks absolutely amazing at times, but like, what the fuck is going on once again? Not only am I being chased by a comet and lightning bolts are raining down on me, the boss is also throwing projectiles at me. This is basically just a dodge until he stops moving simulator, because of the fact that you don't have Torrent, which would have been a perfect addition for the fight. The only reason I beat him was mostly luck, since in my last attempt, he just kind of felt like standing in place and not moving much at all. After his defeat, we can finally finish off this 80-hour run and the video. Next to the anvil, we have a summon sign which starts the Age of the Stars ending. Ranni takes us as her eternal consort on a voyage under the wisdom of the moon. Does that sound unclear to you? Don't worry, we're in the same boat. The main thing is, we are no longer maidenless. Also,
which goddamn hand do I grab?